Hello to all the viewers out there. Welcome to HEX the Kryptosparbuch show. We have an awesome interview partner today. My name is Ellen. We have here Patrick the HEX line, and
Hello.
our interview partner is one of my favorite guests on this show. He has been here. He has been in many other HEX shows as well. It is Kyle, Dev Kyle. He will be answering all our questions. Hi, Kyle. How's it going?
Hello. I'm doing all right. I hope you guys are well.
For sure.
Yes, good. Thank you. Thanks, Kyle, to have the time to come on again with us, because I know there is some things out there, you know, like with the high fees right now, and how should you transact best, and how can you avoid the highest points of the fees, and how can a user behave, like individually putting the numbers down, or where can you exchange best, and like how to avoid failed transactions. And in the end, I would also, if we still have time, I would also like to know from you what the share rate, because you are like the inventor of the founder of the share rate, I like to say.
So there's a couple things. One, your audience should know that you guys tricked me. That you had a very specific question that you asked me over text, and I said, and I tried to give an example. I said, you know, this is probably better done on video. And I get here, and you say, yeah, we have a bunch of other questions, and then maybe at the end we'll do that original question.
But the original one is like in the middle. But okay. we build around like a book of questions.
Oh, yeah, like a question sandwich.
Exactly.
You're so valuable to us. That's why we have to bombard you with all those questions.
I kid. I'm happy to do it. It just always strikes me as funny.
Let's start right away. So at first, I want to have HEX in my wallet, and therefore I need to exchange my ETH, ideally on a decentral way, into HEX. And I have a bunch of options here, like Uniswap or 1inch exchange. So is there a short answer, like what is preferable, or is it like, or it depends?
So there is a short answer. I'll use an analogy. So if you want to buy Ethereum, for example, so you have some in your wallet, but you bought it from somewhere, there are a few ways you can do that. And the exchange rate may be different on a variety of exchanges at any given moment. So the first thing you need to do is find the best price. So if you have multiple exchange options, the first and sort of highest the highest return on your time is if one clearly has the best price, then you should use that. 1inch exchange is a little bit different from Uniswap in that 1inch will attempt to optimize accounting for slippage or price change by the action of buying to distribute your purchase. That takes extra computation, so you may end up paying more because of the gas fees. We had this issue last summer during the sort of insanity around DeFi scams, where the network was clogged up. And so you couldn't just say, well, the fee is minimal, so don't worry about that. Do the math so that you can best balance your transaction. We seem to be getting to that point again, where the fee becomes a substantial part of your transaction amount, especially if you're buying small amounts of Ethereum or of HEX per transaction. So I would say that you have to figure out if there is a big enough price difference to matter. If so, use 1inch because they're doing the math on your behalf. If it is only a small difference, you have 10% different or 5% different, just use the highest liquidity exchange, which is Uniswap. And the reason you would use highest liquidity is your purchase will move the price less, and so you'll get the best deal. It's not worth micro optimizing for every little penny, because the second part of the answer is whatever the predicted fee is an estimate. So the amount of computation that's done to do a 1-inch transaction is slightly variable. So it could be higher or lower than what it predicts, but it'll be close. So if you are in this very tight range between prices and you don't need to do the math to figure out the best way to distribute, just go to the highest liquidity exchange. That's the simple answer, and it's most of the time going to be your best deal. If you're dollar cost averaging in, then maybe little inefficiencies add up over time, but that's kind of a personal decision if you're willing to do the extra time.
Okay, yeah. I mean, what I found out as well is when I'm using Uniswap, sometimes it shows me a route, like it goes from ETH over USDC to HEX, and sometimes not. And when I get the route, it's like 2 times more computation needed. And you know, with extremely high fees, it's like, what?
Yeah.
And
So
is
right.
there a simple way to avoid this route?
That's so I'm not sure what their user interface is doing to do that to you. You should be able to choose the pair that that you want to do directly. I wouldn't trust what they do in their front end because they have added this token sort of bolted on to their system with the promise that it will preferentially route through those liquidity pairs. That's kind of bogus. That's just siphoning money from users, to my view. So I would just use the pair directly, and I don't have it memorized, but you can also just do it through Etherscan if you want. You can just go directly to the pair contract that you want to use and do the inputs that way, if you're really looking to optimize and not have to count on them doing math that's in your favor.
You said that 1 inch normally gives you a better price because it's an aggregator, right? Because of those high fees right now, it's really hard to say to what is better, Uniswap or 1 inch. Did I get that right?
Yeah, and if your audience is interested, the reason that this matters and that it changes over time, there is a unit of computation power called gas. So gas is basically a budget for doing math or doing computations on contracts. And when fees were cheap or essentially non-existent, then a lot of computation, a little computation makes no difference. But when you're paying per computation unit, as we do today and as we did last summer, that immediately exposes like, oh, there's a huge difference between a 10,000 or 50,000 gas computation, which is a basic swap, versus 500,000 gas to figure out an optimal distribution and then do multiple swaps.
Can you please explain for the audience what's the difference between GUI and gas?
Oh, sure.
And why the user should never decrease the gas limit itself or himself?
Yes.
Even better to increase if you would like to play it around with it? Sure.
So gas is the unit of computation. So that is how Ethereum counts up the amount of resources that running code costs. And they rebalance this occasionally, so it's not set in stone. There are values for each possible operation. So adding 2 numbers costs gas. Multiplying 2 numbers costs gas. Storing state, like starting a stake, costs gas. So what a node does when it goes to execute your transaction is it runs through the code and sort of tabulates, okay, this plus this plus this plus this. This is the amount of gas I am going to use to run this transaction. Then there is a cost per gas in GUI. GUI is a billionth of an ether. So, excuse me. So a billion GUI is 1 ETH. So a billion GUI would be $1,700 or something today. So you just multiply those 2 things. So if it's 10 GUI per gas and it's 100 gas to do a thing, then it costs 1,000 GUI. So 10 times 100. So when the GUI per gas goes up to 100. I think last summer we were seeing 400 and 500, sometimes 600 per
Right
gas.
now as well.
Oh goodness, I haven't checked recently.
Yeah, I wrote it in the chat. It's like if you want to be in the next block, it's 546 GY right now.
Okay. So you can see how the difference between 50,000 gas and 100,000 gas suddenly makes a huge difference. I mean, it doubles your cost. But if you're doubling from 1 GWI, at 1 GWI, But if you're going at 500 plus GWI per gas, that's going to add up very quickly.
Yeah.
As an example, there were some instances of folks exploiting or doing arbitrage exploits on various stablecoin platforms, and they were paying something like 1,900 GWI per gas just to guarantee that they could make that trade and take profit. And they would spend $5,000 or $6,000 to run the transaction, but it was worth it because they could arbitrage $50,000. I assume if you're buying a little bit of HEX, you don't want to spend $1,000 to do that. So the GWI matters and the gas matters because they multiply each other. So the gas is something that is not in your control. It just takes what it takes. So the Ethereum node that runs your transaction will say, sorry, you need more gas. You need to allow me to use more gas because this takes more gas. So if you're using MetaMask, it will do an estimate against the contract and say, how much would this take? How much gas would this take? And it's running a node, which will try and run through the code real quick and say, oh, that'll take 500,000 gas. MetaMask then tells you this will take 500,000 gas, and it will suggest pricing for you. If you want it fast or at trader speed, you need to pay more per gas. So the gas you should not mess with. If there is a buggy contract or a contract that has a couple of particular idiosyncrasies, sometimes that estimate is wrong. It's too low. So as you mentioned, you may want to actually bump the allowance. So if MetaMask comes back and says that will take 500,000 gas, it won't hurt you to set that number to 1 million, except if it actually takes 1 million, then you'll have paid the full amount, but your transaction will work. If you don't allow enough, say it says 500,000 and you lower that number, you say, nah, I'm only going to allow 200,000. Well, it's still going to go through 200,000 gas of computations and charge you for it, and then say, you're out of allowance, you can't compute anymore. And then that's a failed transaction. So don't mess with the gas number except to make it bigger. It won't hurt you because it will only consume up to your allowance or the transaction finishes, whichever comes first. The GWI price affects how lucrative it is for a node to run your transaction. So that's the incentive to get it into a sooner block as opposed to a later block. That number you can play with. So I've done this myself. You can change that manually in MetaMask or through other clients to the Ethereum network. You can tell it an actual number you want to use. You can leave it to a library that that talks to the network and gets an idea of what the different plateaus are, like what percentage chance you have of getting in the next block or within the next 10 blocks or the next 100 blocks. Or you can mess with it yourself. If it's too low, a node is just never, it's not lucrative enough for a node to pick up and process your transaction. They don't get paid enough. There are other much more lucrative transactions for them to process instead. Your transaction, if it, so we talked about failed transactions. If you don't allow enough gas, it will just run out of computation resources no matter what you paid, and just say, okay, I used up what you authorized me to do, and it's not enough, it didn't work. Or if you don't pay enough, your transaction will just sit in the pool and never get picked up. It will never be lucrative enough for a node to pick up. So there's a fine balance if you're willing to wait of setting it low, setting the price per gas low, so maybe lower than the slow speed, such that during a quiet block or a quiet sequence of blocks, the nodes will say, I'm not busy, I'll grab that one. It's cheap, but I need to fill my blocks. But if you're too low, then you just never get to that point. And after 3 or 4 or 5 days, it's just stuck. Some nodes don't keep a log that long, so you're basically forgotten. Your transaction is just gone. So I've had that happen where I tried to play it a little bit too conservatively, and then my transaction just sat for 3 days and never got picked up. So I've waited as little as 10 seconds doing this strategy because for whatever reason there's a quiet block, or I just got lucky and a node picked mine even though it was cheap. I've waited hours, 12 hours, 16 hours, and then it finally gets picked up. And I've waited 3 days, and then there's kind of an inconsistent state amongst the network where some of them keep that much history for transactions to draw from, and some don't. And so then I had to get it unstuck. Basically submit a transaction with the same identifier, the same nonce, at a much higher fee so that it will get picked up, and then eject the old stale transaction.
We had the experience that some users tried to, because I said, yeah, you can put down your GUI when starting a stake. They put it down, and on the next day, the transaction was still there. And with other users, they had the issue that on the next day there wasn't a transaction anymore, and the lucky users got like filled with the log way on this current day. I want you to clarify like what's true, and like one of our developers in the German chat already clarified it a bit, as he said that your wallet has like its own index, or like your staking has its own index as well. And if you put one transaction like start stake or end stake transaction, and you put the GUI too low, that it does not get filled on the current UTC day of X, then it still tries to get done on the next day or even on the next day. But when the user changes something, like does a swap with the same wallet, or wants to make another start stake, or wants to make another end stake, then it doesn't work anymore.
Oh, so that could be a few things. Okay, so let's start with, I think I mentioned this once before, though somewhat in passing. So you identify your transactions that you've submitted to the network, but that have not yet been accepted. They don't have a transaction ID yet, with just an incrementing value. It's just a number. So the number of transactions that you've done across all time is usually the number. So if I've done 50 transactions, the next one will be identified with the number 51. That's called a nonce. That's jargon term. It technically means it could be any number, so it's a nonsense number or a nonce. But in practice, it is a incrementing number for every transaction. So if you see that my latest transaction is 51, then you know I've done, or this will be the 51st transaction, and there are none missing. So this is somewhat a useful property, that it always increments by 1, so that you can account for everything that came before it. There are no holes in those numbers. It always goes up by 1. So what I mentioned was, if I have a transaction that is stuck, meaning it's low enough GUI and it's been sitting there long enough that many nodes may just have forgotten it or thrown it away, I have to get my wallet right. So I have to make sure that that nonce number is represented on the network, so that like Etherscan will see that I've done the correct number of transactions.
Is that the reason why I can't queue up transactions?
You can queue up transactions, but I'll explain that in just a moment. Okay. So, because you can do it in code much more easily than through the user interface. So to unstick that transaction or make the network in the right state, I have to submit a transaction using the same number. So if I say 51 and I only want to pay 10 GUI, that's never going to get filled. 5 days pass, and now it's just stuck. It's in the ether. It's in the netherworld. No pun intended. It's just in an in-between state. So what I need to do is I need to craft another transaction, make sure that its nonce is the same. It's 51. So I said, yeah, that 51 that I sent before, I have a different 51, and I'm going to pay a lot more for this one. Then the network will pick it up. It checks out against my history on the blockchain that all of the blocks that are considered good have my 1 through 50.
May I add a question here, because when I have such a thing, I don't put the another 51 with more gas by putting on speed up.
I was going to say MetaMask has a shortcut button. Yep, called speed up or cancel. Cancel is the same thing. Cancel is a transaction that does nothing. So it's send myself 0 ETH. I mean, it's basically the minimal thing that you can commit to the blockchain. So it's the cheapest gas, and then you just pay a lot more GUI per gas to supersede the thing that you submitted.
Yeah, so, or I can go with MetaMask on settings, advanced, and account zurücksetzen, a restore account in English, which just restores the queue, and I can put a new 51st transaction.
Yeah, so you can do that too. You basically trick it that it doesn't know that you have a pending 51st thing. So it has this 2 shortcut buttons. It has speed up, which basically sends the same thing to the blockchain, but with a higher price. There's a rule that the price has to be at least 10% higher. That's just a network rule. So you can't say from 100 to, how about 101? How about 102? How about 103? It has to be at least 110, 121, 133. So to prevent sort of spamming, to kind of laser in on the exact number that will do the trick. So that's speed up, where it submits the same thing. It says, okay, there's this transaction. It's sitting there. Someone could pick it up at 100 and run it. But to make it a little more enticing, I'm going to send the same thing I want done, but at 10% higher cost. Is anyone going to pick that up? And I could just keep doing that. So I could have 10 copies. And once one of them is accepted, it uses up my 51st slot. So all the others will be considered invalid and will be thrown away. So that's the nonce. So queuing up transactions. In code, this is quite easy to do. You just keep track of what the nonce is, send a transaction with that, and then in code, make that number 1 higher, and then set that in the next transaction. Send that. So
is that the reason why Stake can offer you to make your ladder at once, and with GoHex.com you need to wait until the stake button is done and the green line comes, you stake the hex, and then you can go?
So I think the reason for that is because of the way go.hex.com listens for events from the blockchain, that it needs confirmation of the updated state, and it's just simpler to basically post things in the order that you submitted them. Staker is taking advantage of this property that you can queue up multiple transactions, and it just sort of does a sequence of them for you, submits them, and then they'll get filled in whatever order they're filled. And they don't have to be, excuse me, that's not quite right. They have to be filled in nonce order. So if I submit 10 things, the 10th one is blocked by the 9th one. So a node may say, oh, here's this juicy 10th one. Oh, but 10 is too high. I need to wait for 9 to be done. Oh, how about 9? I need to wait for 8 to be done. So like they have to actually resolve in order, but you can submit them all at once and then just wait. And if your gas price is reasonable, that will get done. It'll go 1, 2, 3, 4, 6 through 10. So I've had my Etherscan show 5 deep of queued transactions, and over time it's like, oh, 5 minutes ago that one filled, 2 minutes ago that one filled, these 3 are pending. Come back an hour later, okay, 2 more of them are done, still 1 pending, and I didn't do anything. I just waited.
Cool. I want to ask something.
Sure.
For us Hexicans, there are only like two occasions really important. First, it is the start staking, and second, it's the end staking. When we start a stake, does it has to be before the day rolls over, or can we choose a really low gas fee and take us like 3 days for to start the stake? Is that possible?
So that should be fine. I think you mentioned that users have had this issue where they submit one of those transactions and then they try to do something else. That could be an issue with the nonce, so that it's either been overridden or the second transaction can't resolve until the first one does. So I'm not sure what wallet they're using. I'm not sure the details. The details matter because, as I mentioned, if I submit number 51 at a very low price and then 52 that I want done very fast, the network will say, I'd love to, but 52 is too high. 51 is your next number. So it has to wait until 51 resolves. If the wallet tries to do something convenient for you and override 51 and say, oh, you want this done fast, well, we have this 51 thing, I'll just set this to 51 and do that. It may be a convenience feature. It may be unintended. I'm not sure what the details are. There's nothing in the HEX contract that takes any notice of when you asked it to do something. So in contrast with Uniswap, you have to give it how long it's a valid transaction or a valid swap. So you mentioned that if you set your gas price too low, the transaction fails. And then you question, did it fail or does it get stuck? It actually fails in a lot of cases. So Uniswap wants to know ahead of time how much you're willing to accept for your swap and how long this offer is valid. So if when you set the slippage amount, it's actually calculating what that number is, what you're willing to accept as the minimum amount you want swapped out, and a timestamp of this is only good for 15 minutes. So the transaction gets submitted with those imprinted in the transaction that this transaction or this swap is only valid if when you run it, or when the node runs that contract code, it does a check and it says, okay, so I got your input and here's the liquidity state, and if I do my Uniswap X constant product thing, here's the amount you would get out. Now, what time is it according to the blockchain? Oh, it's much later than when you said you wanted this to expire. Transaction failed. Or, okay, here's your output amount. What time is it? Oh, okay, we're within 5 minutes. That's fine. How much did you say you want back? Oh, this isn't enough. Transaction failed. So those are actually failures where you have pre-committed to what you will accept, both in terms of an output for the swap and a time limit for when it's okay.
Yeah, and those fails also mean you don't have the fees anymore in your wallet.
Yeah, you paid the fees. So you did pay the computer to tell you no.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's an actual failure. The HEX start and end stake is totally insensitive to when you submitted the transaction, meaning there's no additional information about when you asked it to do that. So if I submit a start stake now, but I only offer a very paltry amount of gas, a fee per gas, need to be very careful with those, GUI per gas, it may sit around for a couple of days, but then it starts, and assuming that there's enough balance in my wallet, it will start the stake. If I end stake, and let's say I'm at the 14-day grace period.
Just one more detail for the start stake. When I said I will stake 500 days, and the transaction goes live like 3 days later, it won't be on the actual date I said it. It would be 3 days later.
Yeah, that's correct. So
yeah,
this is a calendar.
Yeah, the calendar
issue.
Yeah.
If I pick a date on a calendar, that's only valid if I make it within the UTC day. for that
And
calendar date to be
speaking
correct.
about details, there is another detail to the calendar. The day you pick is the last day where your stake is still live. So in your time zone, it's nice because you just need to wait until the evening and then you have the rollover. Yeah? But in our time zone, it's like really more or less midnight. So if you're living in Europe, be careful or take like one day before your birthday, for example, because then when you wake up and it's your birthday, you can enter and end stake. Yeah. Don't do it if there is like 99.9% progress. Because you still pay a massive penalty.
That might be a fun game to submit a really low gas fee transaction to end stake like the day before. Just see if you can wait it out for until it becomes okay.
I mean, you are aware of the end stake penalty, so it's and it's huge, like 99.9% done compared to 100%.
That's a fun game for me, for you to do. So you all should do that.
Of course,
game.
yeah.
So that I'll get
nice! It gets distributed to all the other stakers.
Crud! It's too fast.
Okay, so with the start stake, you can do it. You can choose the fee very low, and if it goes 2-3 days later, then it will start, right?
Not very low. Not very low, just like a bit lower. So on the last weekend, the low was like 90 Gwei. If you choose 90 Gwei, I guess it will get done this week. If you're choosing 100 Gwei, I'm pretty sure that it will get done this week. But if you put like 70, 60, I don't think so. And then we go like over 5 days, and then the nodes don't have any record anymore, that they don't know about a transaction to pick anymore. And
so there's actually something useful. So what I do when I want to play this game of not overpaying, you go to it's like ethgasstation.com, I think.
No, it's etherscan.io/gas tracker.
Oh,
or you can go on hex.vision as well.
Oh, okay. So there's a variety of ways to check this, but you can actually see what the gas fee was for the last percentage of blocks. So if I do this live, it probably won't show up very well. But the site that I've always checked just for sort of a quick estimate is, I think, ETH Gas Station. And you can look at the last 200 blocks, and it'll show you what percentage of 50 Gwei prices made it into 200 blocks, or 90 Gwei, or 100 Gwei. And then you could just kind of say, oh, if there's a 40% chance that I'll make it in the next 200 blocks, that's good enough for me, and then do that. Or just whatever your level of comfort is for that.
So we talked about the start staking, and we hadn't talked about the end staking.
Yeah, so end staking. This is the only place that you can get into a little bit of trouble. Again, you could do it early with a super low price, and maybe it will actually move across the day boundary. Don't really do that. That's a joke.
No, don't do that. That's just a joke, please.
Yeah. So you have a grace period. Just wait an extra 2 days and then pay a higher gas fee or something. Like, it'll be okay. Don't worry about the calendar math. If you are near the end of your grace period, if you forgot, if you lost internet access for whatever reason, if you're near the end of your grace period, pay the right amount of gas fee. Because if you roll over days in that case, you may enter into late penalty territory, because the contract only Hello. So the contract only checks the time when your transaction actually is committed. It doesn't care when you submitted it. So this is the joke about submitting early but for low Gwei. You're sort of playing this game where if it delays long enough, the contract doesn't know that you tried to end stake early. It only knows when you actually did end stake. So if you're at day 13 or on the 14th day of grace period, and you roll over days, and maybe you roll over 2 days, then you're entering into late penalty territory. So start stake is not very sensitive to when it runs. but end stake can be.
And with the end stake, still should I aim that the transaction gets through within 4 days or something like that?
So
or how does this work, you know?
So this is hard because the answer, it goes from just pay the fast rate because it's cheap, which is true sometimes. Sometimes it is cheap to run transactions. And sometimes it really makes a difference. I mean, the difference between 500 gwei and 200 gwei is substantial for ending a stake, particularly a long stake that can cost millions of gas. Right. So, I mean, the contract was written so that a 5,555 day stake would cost roughly 8 million gas. So at 8 million gas, a gas price of 200 would be awful. That would be a very expensive transaction. And 500 would be astronomical. So if you are not worried about hitting the end of the grace period, then you can definitely be more conservative, and it just needs to end within a few days. And if gas prices are so insane that you're willing to take the risk, or rather, you're willing to run this a couple of times, because if you guess wrong, it waits 3 days, and then you have to do the speed up of at least 10% more, and then that takes a few days, maybe that doesn't work, you do it again. So if you can be attentive, then you can be even more conservative. And when fees are high, that's probably worth trying if you can be attentive. If you just need to get this done and then you're going on a family vacation and you're not going to look at it again, try and get it done quickly. Because if you need to do it again, there could be this lag of hours or days.
Kyle, do you think that for our long stakes we will see end staking fees with 1 gwei again? Because like everybody moved to other layer solutions and layer 1 is not pretty used anymore.
Expectations. You're asking for expectations.
I ask for expectations. Yes, of course.
That's a great question. So there are a lot of challenges. There are a lot of challenges with ETH2 or moving to layer 2. So the layer 2 solutions are not unified at the moment. So the couple that I know of that are very sophisticated and getting better all the time are the ZK Sync system and the Starkware. Starkware has a programmable layer now. So they are both getting started with some pilot projects where folks are writing contracts on layer 2, because that's a necessary component. You have to be able to execute logic on layer 2, not just move assets around. Yes, I have a puppy.
Yeah, it's like, I guess HODL will love the video of today.
Yeah, he's a very big puppy. So, and he's bumping my Wi-Fi connection. So if I cut out, that's what's happening. So layer 2 has a ways to go. So the things that would need to happen. One, they need to be fully featured. So you need to be able to write contracts that can correctly write stuff back to the L1 chain, and then people have to either recreate the dApps they already have. So the DEXs and DeFi stuff seem like very obvious candidates for this. They want higher throughput because that's the only thing that they're missing off of centralized solutions is throughput and then user interface. So, and user experience. So once that gets done, these companies that already are centralized entities producing decentralized applications will need to rewrite that software. It will need to be robust, meaning that it's already survived all of the punishment that scammers and hackers are going to throw at it, because it'll be very lucrative to find security vulnerabilities. So that has to happen. And if that happens, then the major use of L1 of primary Ethereum will be to just take these big bulk transactions from the various layer 2s. I assume there will be 2 or 3 flavors of that. Once that happens, purportedly that will take a lot of the pressure off of high gas fees, because right now the only way to get speed is to pay more. So ideally, these L2 solutions will take some of that pressure off. Vitalik does not seem as convinced that that's going to bring us back to the days of one Gwei, because as DeFi and layer 2 becomes more usable and more widely adopted, that will only tell the people who've been sitting on the sidelines, hey, it's usable now, come on board. So it will increase demand. So he gave this was kind of a longish piece of writing that spoke to one of the things I was kind of worried about, that people we're talking about layer 2 is going to solve it all, and then it's going to be great and cheap. And that's not necessarily true. Like if it works well, then there will be a large amount of adoption, and then that will put scaling pressures on those L2 solutions. And the bulk transactions that get written back to the blockchain will now be competing with each other. I mean, the daily trading volume on serious brick and mortar exchanges, or like stock exchanges or futures or commodities exchanges, is enormous. And if they want to be persisting tens of thousands of transactions a second, that is going to be difficult. And so, so that technology, it is an arms race. To take the business that's being done in the real world and put it on the blockchain, even with scaling solutions, will in turn run into scaling problems. So I don't know that we're going to see one Gwei again. We may never. And if Ethereum works, and if L2 works, we're only going to absorb more of the current financial world onto the blockchain. So we'll just have the problem again. So instead of competing with individual users trying to do arbitrage stuff, you'll be competing with big chunks of transactions being persisted from layer 2 to layer 1.
Yeah,
so
I mean, but this
I'm not
big
convinced.
chunks of transactions, like I would say that most of this stuff needs to be done during the week because of institutional buyers and sellers, because of traders, you know. Usually there are also less traders even on the crypto market, even as the market is open, you know.
Yeah.
So we have the 2 weeks of grace period, so still we can
I suspect that it will get less
guess
expensive.
that on the weekends it will be cheaper.
So there will still be quiet periods. There are today. I mean, there's still like off prime times today that happens. So I think that will all still be true. What I'm saying is I don't think it's going to go away, because as unfortunately, success is going to be our own worst enemy here. That as we succeed in absorbing the traffic that would otherwise be going to Forex or something, then you have to scale for that. And we're relying on a couple of particular technologies and companies to do that. And that is very, very hard to do. Like, that's a massive undertaking. There's a huge amount of money in building out the platforms that do that today. And they don't have to worry about ZK snarks, right? I mean, they just like, we'll just save it to the Oracle database. Like, that's easy. So this is, it's very hard. All I'm saying is that I'm not convinced we're going to get to transactions being essentially free because L2 solved it all. I think L2's success will bring the traffic that keeps us in this problem, and it's a good problem to have. So one of the things that has been very valuable to learn is that these transactions are valuable to run. That's why people pay to run them. As I mentioned early on, there are arbitrage traders now who will pay $5,000 to run a single transaction because that transaction is worth $50,000 to them. So if we absorb more of the traditional financial world, it will just continue to be valuable to run transactions. And ending your stake may cost a few $1,000s if you're, at the max 10-year or 15-year length. Because you're paying for millions of gas worth of interest calculation. Yeah, then it'll be worth it. I mean, maybe you'll take out a short-term loan or something, but it'll be worth it to do that.
Yeah, I mean, which brings me to my next question. I mean, thinking about that, because when it comes to the Quattro Cinco, to the like maximum staking lengths,
Cinco, that's a great term.
Quattro Cinco, yeah. Haven't you watched like I don't know like who came up with it, but I guess it was someone from the Discord syndicate.
That's great.
But yeah, Quattro Cinco stake.
Nice. Learn something new every day.
Yeah, and like speaking about how much hex to stake for that time, because as an onboarder, I never recommended anything for the long term, like for the short term, because for the short term, I know guys, hex, when you stake it for 1 year, you will make between 12 and 14%. If you want to stake 1,000 hex, which is currently worth that much and currently costs that much, knowing that you will get between 12 and 14% in 1 year, is it really worth it to stake just 1,000 hex right now? You know, so here I give a bit of advice, but when it comes to the Quattro Cinco stakes, I was like meaning that it's not important like which amount of hex it is. I mean, of course, 1 hex might be not enough, but speaking about like 1,000 hex, what is 1,000 hex worth today? Like $12. For example, when I made my longer than 10-year stakes, the hex I put it there were less than $12.
Yeah.
Not all, but in some of those stakes, you know.
Yeah, so there's it's definitely an individual choice. There is your outlook on the long-term prospects of Ethereum matter here. So if you think that this is where the innovation's happening and thus it will have sort of a first mover advantage, because this, as it happens, this is where everybody is solving scalability problems, some of the serious cryptography problems around zero knowledge proofs. It's very friendly to experimentation. And to me, I am confident that in 15 years, lots of advances will have been made and that this problem will be manageable, because it's important. I mean, everybody knows that it's not just an academic toy, that big amounts of money are being moved and even more could be moved into the decentralized space if the applications of this research work. And so, I mean, maybe that is, that I'm just generally optimistic, but Ethereum does feel like the place where academics and research are meeting application and engineering. And that, oh, come on, dog. Oh, my goodness.
Yeah, I can see it.
I'm going to answer this
question.
He
tried to warn you.
Yeah, he did, and I knew what was coming, but I'm going to answer this question, then take 5. So I'm very optimistic on where this particular blend of smart, motivated, sort of, I don't want to use a platitude, but sort of freedom-minded people come together to do research, solve hard problems, and then build those solutions and not just put them in papers. Yeah, so I'm bullish on the ecosystem and the underlying system that's going to power Hex for the foreseeable future. You can't help but laugh because
I need to laugh because I'm reading the chat a bit and somebody wrote your dog just end staked.
I smelled that end stake.
Yeah, so I see Kyle is back. He cleaned up the end stake of his dog, and welcome back, Kyle.
Hey, thanks. Glad to be here.
Yeah,
that was good. Let him finish ending the stakes outside. We're good
now. Yeah, Kyle. One question from the audience: what do you think about EIP 1559 to help with gas?
So that was actually the context in which Vitalik was talking about reducing the price of gas will drive demand, which will likely restore the price of gas.
Yeah,
So
and speaking about gas here, is it like the efficiency to calculate on the Ethereum blockchain, or does it also means like the GUI will go down, or is it like the gas limit will go down?
So the current state is that blocks are specified to have, I think, between 8 and 10 million gas worth of transactions. And nodes do some kind of rough math to figure that out. Like they'll run the transactions virtually and do all the calculation for gas, and then once they hit around 8 million, and I guess there's some flexibility in that number because I've seen it as high as 10 million, they will commit all of those transactions, and that's still considered good. From what I've read about EIP 1559 is what it does is it creates much more flexibility around that number, and specifically that some GUI or some ether is burned per block. So it creates a tension to target 8 million gas, but you can go under or over and still have valid blocks. And that because of the flat burn amount, there's now some pressure to be above a certain amount, so you're not just printing empty blocks, but that you have a lot of latitude to cram lots of transactions into very high demand blocks. So the point of that is, right now, there's a fixed size of things that can be committed per block. So you will only, if you're a smart node operator, take the top end things by price, by GUI per gas price, and just cram them all in. And then everything that's not expensive enough or that's not lucrative enough just has to wait because I have a fixed size that I need to fill or can fill. So I'll only put valuable things in there. In this new idea, you can overpack blocks by taking more cheaper transactions on high demand cycles, so that you have exceeded that hard cap of 8 million, because it's not a hard cap anymore. And there's some pressure not to do that forever because of this burning mechanism. And there's also so it adds flexibility. So in theory, not everybody needs to pay the max price to guarantee they get into a fixed size box. You can be a little more flexible with your price because the box is flexible. He went on to say this is just a patch because demand will almost certainly increase to push prices back up again. We'll just introduce this flexibility, so for a period we can relax a little bit on this competition for insane priced transactions to fit in a very fixed size box.